Hello everyone, I wanted to make a video on how to set air layers on fig trees. This is my process, and hopefully you guys can pick up on some of my processes, which should help you venture into this great craft. So I do have a tote of soil. Any kind of soil medium will work as long as it's inert, meaning it doesn't have tons of nutrients in it, doesn't have compost. Here I have a mix that contains sphagnum moss, coco coir, and perlite. Something very simple. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to burn out your roots. I wet it down, made sure that there was enough moisture for it to absorb overnight. Closed the lid. I made sure I taped up any little holes to prevent any gnats from exploring and setting eggs, which would just ruin your roots. But yes. And what you want to look for is a consistency like this. See how it holds its form? If I squeeze it and it's not waterlogged, I don't have any water that's dripping. You see? It holds it fairly nicely. That's what we're looking for. And we're only going to need a couple of items today to get this done. These are 4 by 16 inch poly bags. These are available 100 count for $7. You can find that on FigBid, and they come in very handy. I actually originally purchased these to use as fig pops. Some of you may be familiar with that process when you're rooting cuttings via the fig pop method. Fig pops don't really work for me, they work for others. Stick with what works for you. There's many ways to root, but anyhow, these came in very handy for me because now I'm able to use them for my air layers, and I've been using these for the last couple of years. They're great, and it is 1 mil thickness. If you Google it, you can look up poly bags, FigBid, you'll find these. Also, what I'll need is a grafting knife, but a box cutter works just as well. A bag of rubber bands, zip ties, and foil. And I'll explain what we'll be using these items for as we move along. So what we're looking for is a candidate. So right now, today, we are going to use a Col de Dame Gigantina. And as you can see, the wood here is lignified, meaning that it is hardened off. It is not green. This is a great candidate. You don't want to use unlignified wood. Unlignified wood will root for you. In fact, it'll root a lot faster, but it will be subject to rot and breaking. So the roots will be more delicate. I've noticed whenever you use a hardened off wood, you'll get better results. So here's a great example of lignified and unlignified wood. It's a fairly small tree. Obviously I wouldn't set an air layer on this, but we're just using this for demonstrational purposes. So this is hardened off wood. It's lignified. It has a bark now. And this is unlignified wood. So you may have trees that have branches that are super green like this. And yes, you can air layer them, but you're running a risk of them breaking once they root. And then the transitional phase is just it's not pretty. Sometimes you get great success, but I rather not gamble with that. Anyways, you're aiming for lignified wood like this. So we'll grab our poly bag, and we want to fold it over to about halfway. That will allow us to fill up the bag with the medium, the soil. You grab it by hand. You can use a cup. You can use something to help you fill it. I think by hand is just as easy. And since it's not super dry, it's easier to handle. Feels almost like that magic quicksand that the kids play with, or something like a Play-Doh. But you want to fill it up, and this looks like more than enough, but actually once I flip this over and allow it to settle, it'll probably come down to maybe a third of the bag, if not half. So I give it a good little shake, and as you can see here, it's a little bit less than half. of the bag, which is good. Now what I want to do now is give it a little twirl and move along to the next bag. Now I do this so that I don't allow any insects, any gnats to come in and settle down, set any kind of eggs, which would cause issues with rotting. So, smart move. Also, don't keep your container open until you're ready to use it. Just leave it open. You're just inviting. So anyhow, move along to the next couple of bags. But to speed up the process, we're going to move on to the next step. So we're going to grab our grafting knife or box cutter, okay? And we're going to look for a good section on our fig tree. Generally, I'm happy with a foot, maybe less than a foot. It really doesn't matter the size. Just look for a good space. If you find that you have a section that you want to air layer, but there's leaves in the way, you can just easily cut them off. It will not affect the air layer at all, won't affect the tree. In fact, it might even help speed up some of the process. So luckily this tree already has some of its leaves stripped down, but you could easily just cut it down. So at this point you want to make sure that your bag is fairly compact. You don't want it smushed down, but you also don't want it too airy because we will need it to kind of hold its form. So go ahead and give it a good twist, a squeeze, and then make a knot. This will help it keep its form. Next, we'll get our box cutter or grafting knife, and we're going to make a slit right down the middle. I like to use this side, right down the middle, not where the corners are at. We could do that, but I've just found it works a lot better here because of these seams. So anyhow, as you can see here, we're going to be cutting down this way. And I'm going to stop where the seam begins, and I'm going to stop where the top of the knot is. And always be cautious when doing so. If your blade is sharp enough, it doesn't need that much pressure. So as you can see here, perfect slit from the bottom all the way to the top. And at this point, what I want to do is prep my area. So we need to determine where we want our airlayer to be set. Okay, these are nodes. So every section that has a leaf is a node. Okay, you want to aim to set your airlayer slightly below one of the nodes. This will help more of the roots come out. There's two different methods. Some people believe that making a band, removing a band of the cambium will help increase the rooting success and also help wean it once it's ready to be removed from the mother tree. I've tried both both processes. They both work. You don't have to cut the band. You can give it a light score, which helps encourage roots. You can just leave it be. For this demonstrational purpose, I'm going to actually cut the band to show you what we're talking about. And I'm going to aim to have the air layer just a little bit lower. Actually, just for the video, I'll have it set right here because of this this leaf that I cut. So we're going to actually use our knife, and we're going to use a back and forth rocking motion. And I am not applying pressure. As you can see, there's latex that's coming out of the tree. And we're going to move our knife and do the same all around. This may take 3 different tries for me to be able to go all the way around. Just want to ensure that you have a straight line all around. And watch your fingers, be careful. Again, I'm going to do the same thing a little bit, about a half an inch to an inch. I'm going to do another line the same fashion. Again, rocking motion. Be very careful not to cut yourself or to break too much into the tree. All right. And now we're going to make a cut right down the middle where the two lines meet. Then you're going to use the edge of your knife and lightly pick up the band. As you can see here, it's coming off fairly easily. Sometimes I can do it with the knife, sometimes I go in and just use my nail. See? Now I've removed a band of bark. No longer needed. So at this point, we're going to use the edge of our knife and we're going to scrape off any excess wood, any excess cambium that you may see, all the way around. If you see any green, scrape it off till you see the white pith, the inside. All right. Some people have extreme sensitivity to the latex, so you can wear gloves or you can have a wet napkin to wipe your hands off with. It's also important to wipe off your blade in between air layers. This stuff can get gunky, and if your tree has fig mosaic virus, it could spread onto another tree. So, you know, practice best caution. It's up to you, whatever you prefer. At this point, some people like to use a rooting hormone. Again, it's optional. Again, I didn't include it in the list of items because I've successfully rooted many air layers without it. And I'm not against it. I use it from time to time. If I have it handy, I'm going to use it. If I don't have it, I'm not going to stress about it. So at this point, you can brush on your rooting hormone. You want to use a gel or liquid, don't use the powder. And what you want to do is apply it underneath the node right here. This is where the roots should develop, all right here where we're going to set our air layer. You'll have roots, so you want to give it a good brush, let it dry, come back, hit it another time. Okay. Also, to encourage rooting, you can give a light score, meaning you just use the edge of your blade and score it just very lightly. You don't have to go too deep, and that just kind of helps scar up some of the areas, and the tree will push out roots from that area. Okay, so we'll imagine that we put rooting hormone, or we opted not to, and now we're going to get our air layer bag, which we've cut a slit into, and it should open up easily like this. And we are going to grab our branch and wrap the bag around the section. You want the bottom to kind of overlap the band that you cut, about so. You don't want to set it up here or all the way here. You want it just about there. You also will need to prep your rubber band. You're going to just cut it in half, so that way you can use it for tying, or have your zip tie ready so you can attach it to the tree. Okay? So that your bag isn't just sliding off. All right? So now we're going to grab our bag carefully, and you can lean your branch over so you don't lose all of your soil. I've done it many times where I'll just go too fast and I lose a lot of soil. So we're going to lean it over a bit here and tuck it in, and then we're going to grab and squeeze. And we're being very careful not to break the branch from where we remove the band. Very important. So as you can see here, we have a nice connection all the way around. At this point, we are ready to zip tie it or use a rubber band to fix it to the tree. There we go. Make sure it's nice and snug. And now we've set an air layer, but we're not finished yet. So at this point we can add another zip tie here to ensure that the air layer doesn't slide down. We can set another one up here. You know, don't be afraid to go overboard with it. It's not necessary, but if it makes you feel better, definitely do it. I like to use a rubber band, the one that we cut previously, and it helps kind of keep this part intact, because as you can see it was a little exposed. Use one up here as well. So I do a combination. I do zip tie, rubber band, rubber band. So we'll go ahead and tie that up. There we go. So at this point I'd like to remove the excess bag, the top of the excess bag here. We don't need that. Also cut off the excess from the zip tie. And at this point we're ready to use our foil. Why do we use aluminum foil? Well, it's going to do a number of things. One, it's going to protect the air layer from the excess heat, which will dry out your soil. So it's going to trap in the moisture. It's going to encourage roots to come out. It's also going to protect the roots from the damaging sun. And it will also help deter some animals, some critters. A lot of them don't like foil for some reason. It will also help keep your air layer in place. So, number of reasons to use foil. You want to get a strip that's fairly long. I think that's about a foot, maybe 14 inches or so. And we want to kind of gauge how high we want to have this foil. If your foil is too wide, then you can actually fold it down a bit to where it's a more manageable size for your air layer. So we'll go around and wrap this guy up, ensuring that we're covering any areas that may allow ants to come in, and for moisture to be released. Now, we're going to leave this guy like this for a couple of weeks, maybe a month and a half. The tree will do what it wants to do on its own. If it wants to root, it will on its own. The earliest I've seen roots develop is a week and a half. The longest it's taken is 2 months. But on average, I would say 3 weeks is fair. Now what you want to do is, if you have excessive heat, you're in a zone where summers is blasting, excessive temperatures, what you want to do is check this air layer periodically, once a week or so. Go ahead and open it up and open up the foil, that is, and see if it requires any additional water or moisture. Our medium was not waterlogged, but now that it's trapped inside this bag, that moisture will start to develop in there, inside the bag, which will help encourage the roots. But once you do set roots, you'll see that this thing gets thirsty. You'll have to start watering it. I like to use a syringe, or if you have a opening on one of the slits, you can use a watering can, something gentle that can allow water to come in and allow more moisture to be retained inside of the air layer. Now, this guy will be ready once you see that all of the roots have started to circle. You may get a little trigger happy and decide that it's ready to cut when you see a couple of roots poking out. Don't do that, because you want to make sure that it has developed its own roots and the roots are hardened off. A hardened off root will look more yellowish than it would look white. You'll see like white tips when it's first starting to root, but once it's hardened off and ready to be removed, most of the roots will start to kind of circle around because it has nowhere to go. That lets you know it's ready to cut off, and then you're ready to set it in its new pot, in its new environment. It's ready to be weaned off of the mother. That's why we cut that band. And at that point, you'll wait a couple weeks, maybe a month or two, for it to develop more roots in its new pot. And then you'll have a new tree, an air layer becoming a tree. So we'll come back and check on this guy. One more thing I wanted to add is that if you have a tree that's like this, tall, lanky, it is now top heavy because of the air layer that we've set. If you don't have high winds, then maybe it's not a concern. But for me, I'm in Texas, we may get some high winds every now and then. We want to be cautious. The last thing you want is for this to bend over and snap off. So what we'll do is grab a bamboo stake that you'll find anywhere at any hardware store. Some of these clips that I found on Amazon. We're going to stake this down into the pot or ground, depending if it's an in-ground tree or potted. And we are going to clip the branch onto our bamboo stake. Now we have assured ourselves that this will not fall over. Support is very important. Thank you guys for supporting. Hey guys, it's August the 7th. It's already been 4 weeks to date. We set our air layer back on July the 10th. Again, it's August the 7th today, 4 weeks on the nose. And I did come back, checked earlier today. I know we have roots, but just wanted to follow up on this guy and show you the results. As you can see here, we have roots. In fact, we have some feeder roots right there, which is a good sign. A little ant, never bothered nobody. And roots all the way around. So it's a great sign. As you can see, there's a lot of moisture built up inside the bag being retained, which is a good sign. I did check on these periodically, and luckily didn't have to add any extra moisture to them. We did get a break of rain. Wasn't much, but I think it may have helped, keep some of the moisture trapped in. So I will continue to keep an eye on these until the roots wrap around the air layer. Then it'll be time to cut this guy off and set it in soil, and we'll have a brand new tree. And it's in really great shape, as you can see here. I've had it underneath my walk-in fruit cage that I built earlier this year, so it's actually helped out a lot. And we have some fruits, Coldedama gigantina, getting pretty close there. But a little before and after, showing the progress. Some of you may wonder, when is a good time to set an air layer? Really, you can set an air layer at any time. You can do spring, summer, fall. In the spring, you do get a lot of new growth. So if you set an air layer on a branch, you may get double, triple that growth from the top that you weren't really accounting for. Now, if you air layer in the summer, that can definitely help you, because the tree's pretty much halted its new growth for the time because of the heat, and you can pretty much pinpoint how long you want your air layer to be, and it'll generally be that same once it starts to root, the same height. You could also set one in the fall. I've done them late in the fall, and I've allowed them to overwinter on the mother tree. That means you don't cut them off, you allow the leaves to fall off along with the rest of the tree, and it goes dormant. And even though there's roots set, it'll be perfectly safe until spring arrives and you start getting brand new growth, brand new shoots. And that's the time it lets you know that it's time to remove, and then you can up pot your brand new tree in the spring. So as long as you protect your air layer, your mother tree, overwinter it. Again, this is just for potted figs. It doesn't really apply to in-grounds. So you just want to account for that. If you're able to protect it, bring it inside the garage, let it go dormant. You can set the air layer any time of the season, short of winter. Thank you guys.